Welcome to a special summer edition of the Agape Guy Show. Hello everybody and welcome to the Agape Guy Show. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. Today I'd like to go off script a bit so I can speak from the heart and give some encouragement. I've noticed a lot of people showing up who are new to learning about God's love and some similar related issues. Since I've been down this road of believing in God's love for 20 years, I'd like to help folks who are learning. I'd also like to let folks know that if you're having difficulty learning this stuff, you're in good company. Many of us have had difficulty learning this stuff. I can also tell you that I'm no guru and I'm not perfect, but I might have some things to share to help some folks. I can also tell you that I'm still learning, and I even learned some good stuff from people who are new to these issues. I'd like to help people by sharing about some of the difficulties I had when I was first learning about this stuff. I can tell you that this is a bit difficult for me to talk about personally because this was a very difficult and painful time in my life. I went through a lot of difficulties and it seemed like my learning process was just slow and frustrating. I had just left a church group that had a lot of problems and had just started to attend another church group. The next church group where I became a regular attender is where I first learned about God's love. I went to a weekend conference at this church and I liked what I heard and I wanted to learn more. I talked to some friends I met at this church and they told me that they had learned a lot of this stuff in the few months prior to this time. My friends said that they would try to help me learn about this stuff. They even gave me an audiobook so I could learn more. This is where I sort of ran into my first problem here that I'd like to talk about. My first problem was that I was naive enough to think something magical would happen if I listened to the audiobook. I thought it would be just as if Jesus walked up to me, put his hands on me, and healed me in an instant. I thought my life would be smooth sailing and everything would work out great after that. Well, I went through the audiobook and didn't notice any big change in my life, so I was a bit disappointed. I was a bit immature about it as well, and I went back to my friends and told them that the book must be all fluff and no substance. I told them that I went through the whole book, but it didn't seem to change my life at all. My friends told me to remain calm, and then they told me a few things. One is that they told me to keep going through the book because it did teach a lot of good stuff about God's love. And two, they also told me that it can take quite a while for some people to learn to apply these things to their life. I can also say that I had a lot of bad beliefs that needed to be addressed in my life. Those bad beliefs were leading me away from God's love, so I needed some guidance to get me back to God's love. So that next week, as I went to and from work, I listened to those CDs of the audiobook, and I slowly started learning more and more. I even started to understand some of the things that the guy was talking about in the book that were kind of deep subjects. Yet, this led me to my second big problem. My second problem was that I had heard church leaders and teachers teach that we need to have a balanced view of God's love. It needed to be balanced by looking at God's anger, wrath, and justice and holiness. I went back and told my friends that I had heard a lot of teaching that God's love needed to be balanced and we needed to have a balanced view of it. I told them that I heard many church leaders teach that God's love needed to be balanced with his anger, wrath, justice, and holiness. My friends told me that the Bible never really clearly taught those things. They also said that many preachers took verses out of context to make it seem like God was angry. But God isn't angry with us. This led me to see that a lot of words translated as things like wrath were actually words that meant God loved us. It was even bigger than that. It meant God passionately loved us. I then remembered that a few years prior to this, I had taken a theology class and learned about God's nature. In the class, the professor taught that love was God's nature. I then remembered that they never taught us that these other things were God's nature, such as anger wasn't God's nature. Destructive forms of wrath wasn't God's nature. Destructive forms of justice weren't God's nature either. Some people might say that, holiness is God's nature, but that doesn't kick out the love part of his nature. So God's holiness and love are meshed together. Some people might also ask, what does it look like when God's love and holiness are meshed together like that? Well, you could look at 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, and you can see what that love is like, especially when love and holiness are meshed together. It says things like God is kind and patient, and God in his love can't be provoked to anger against us, and he doesn't hold any of our wrongs against us. You could also look at Galatians 5, verses 22 through 23, where it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is God's character and the way he is and the way he acts. Have you ever noticed that one of the fruits of the Spirit is gentleness? That shows that God treats us good and isn't harsh toward us. When I started to understand this, a lot of my stress and anxiety started to go way down. I realized that God wasn't always looming around the corner waiting to beat me down for the least little mistake I made in life. As I kept listening to that audiobook over and over again, I kept learning more and more, yet that kind of led me to another problem. My third problem was that I couldn't figure out how Christians accomplished anything if they didn't live by works, or as some people call it, living by works, or works of the flesh, or works of self-effort, or works of self-righteousness. There's a few things I learned that helped me with this issue. I learned why we don't need to live by works. One, many people live by works because they're trying to earn God's love. Yet God already loves us with the maximum amount of love, and he always has loved us. So we don't need to earn it because we already have it, and we've always had it. The second thing is, many people live by works so they can appease God's anger. Yet 1 Corinthians 13:5 says that God in his love can't be provoked to anger against us. So God's never angry with us. So we don't need to appease God's anger because he isn't angry with us. This is also slightly embedded in the idea that God gets angry with us for every little mistake we make in life. Yet in reality, he's never angry with us. He never gets angry for every least little mistake we make or the least little foibles in life. And the third thing I learned was a lot of people think that they need to live by works so they can gain favor with God. Yet God already loves us and God is always good to us. So you can't gain any more favor because we already have his favor. The Bible also says in Matthew 5:45 that God sends rain to the just and the unjust. So God is already good to every single one of us. Besides, you can't bribe God. There are several places in the Bible where it shows that God is impartial and nothing we can do can change that. I would also say that it's always a good idea to follow the Holy Spirit's guidance instead of living by works. I can also say that it's always good to show kindness to other people around you. I've also made a list of things I've learned over the years to help show what the Spirit might be guiding you to. If the Spirit is guiding you to do something, here's a list of that the Spirit will provide for you. If the Spirit wants you to do something, 1, the Spirit will give you the idea to do it. 2, the Spirit will give you the desire to do it. 3, the Spirit will give you the strength to do it. 4, the Spirit will give you a joy to do it. 5, the Spirit will give you love in your heart to do it. 6, the Spirit will help you have a love in your heart for other people so you will want to help them. 7. The Spirit will help you sense that you should do it. And 8. The Spirit will give you a peace about it and a calm heart about it. If you don't sense some of these things, then perhaps the Spirit might not be guiding you to do those things. As I started to learn these things, my stress and anxiety level went down even more. Yet as I kept learning, I ran into another problem. The fourth problem I ran into was that as I learned about God's love, I tried to show it to others, but I kept failing. Every attempt seemed to end in failure, and I seemed to be making a mess of every situation. I later learned that I was actually showing love to others as a system of works done in my own fleshly strength. I was only trying to impress God and other people. I wasn't really loving people just to be loving. As I saw that I was failing over and over again, I wanted to talk to my friends again to get some advice. I also wanted to ask them why I didn't seem to be making a breakthrough in my life. I thought that learning about God's love would make a big change and a big breakthrough in my life. Yet I didn't seem to make or see that big breakthrough come through at all. My friends told me that they were going to have a big cookout at their house, and they invited me over to join them. I wanted to take the occasion to ask them some more questions and get some more advice, so that's what I did. I went to their house at the end of the week and started to ask them some questions and ask for some advice. As the discussion progressed, I started talking about deep theological stuff. My friends told me that they noticed that I did that in a lot of my conversations. They also pointed out some other things to me. My friend told me that I obviously had a lot of theological knowledge, and that was nice. Yet I used my knowledge to talk down to other people. I hadn't noticed that before. I kind of felt a bit embarrassed that I had been talking down to people and being a bit unkind. I then decided within my own heart and mind that I would try to stay away from getting into these lofty theological conversations, especially if I use those occasions to talk down to people. As the discussion continued to progress, I started talking about some church leaders who had mistreated me in the past. My friends told me that they noticed that a lot of my conversations seemed to turn to talking about these other church leaders that had mistreated me in the past. They also noticed that I seemed a bit bitter about it and that I seemed to want revenge against those other church leaders. My friends told me that vengeance is only up to God and that we should never get revenge. That was made quite clear in the Bible. They also told me that I seemed to be getting bitter about it. I also learned that bitterness can sneak up on you in subtle ways, and it can overtake you without you even knowing it. It can then lead you away from God's love, and I think that was a big part of the problem. My friends told me to take these things to God and ask God to help me with these issues. Yet, at the time, I was being a bit immature and unkind about it, and I couldn't tell if my friends were trying really hard to help me or if maybe they were being a bit harsh toward me. Obviously, I was a bit immature and thought they were being harsh, so I avoided them over the next few weeks as we attended church services. Obviously, I was being a bit silly about the whole thing. I can also admit that I was very frustrated and I was a very confused young guy at the time, and it was very difficult for me to understand these things. I had prayed for a lot of this stuff before and didn't know what else to pray for or what to say to God. I didn't know how to pray in any type of a different way. I didn't even know what to pray for. I felt like I was stuck in a rut in life and I couldn't figure out a way to get out of the rut. It was maddening and extremely frustrating. I didn't know what to do. I was about to just throw up my hands and just give up. During this time, I went forward at the end of a church service to have an assistant pastor pray for me. I told him that I didn't know what to pray for, but that I thought God had something for me. So I wanted to ask God to help me make a breakthrough in my life so I could get to whatever it was that he had for me. The assistant pastor was a nice, kind-hearted person, and I appreciated him praying for me. Yet, once again, I didn't notice that anything had changed in my life. Over the next couple of weeks, I needed to travel to the mountains to work with my brother, and so that's what I did. Yet as I traveled, that was where I had a couple of big arguments with God, and I ended up surrendering myself to him and his love. That's what changed everything for me. You can see that in some of my first couple of videos I had, Season 1, Episode 1 and 2. If you look at my YouTube channel, you can find them there. I know this journey of learning can be frustrating at times, but don't be too tough on yourself. I'm sure God's still trying to help you, and I'm sure there's plenty of folks in the great cloud of witnesses that are cheering you on. I just wanted to keep things real and authentic as I talked about this stuff. Life isn't perfect, and we all make mistakes and foibles in our journey through life. Yet I believe God can help us and guide us. As I look back on these things, I see where God seemed to be guiding me every step of the way. Although these changes really don't happen instantly and they don't happen overnight. But it's kind of like the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. And if you think of a little baby doesn't learn to walk on its own all in one day. It takes time and a lot of practice and experience and trying to do things over and over again. This process can be kind of like untangling an electrical cord or an extension cord, or maybe if you've ever had one of those long lines of Christmas tree lights that you put away at the end of the year. Yet the next year you bring it back out and it's so tangled up and tied in so many knots that it's hard to even get the thing untangled to even be able to use it. But yet that's what this process can be like. It can be those situations where it seems like you finally get to where you can start understanding some things, but then you start to remember some of those old beliefs you used to have, and then you start comparing them to God's love, and they don't seem quite so compatible like maybe they used to. So it can take a long time or even years to untangle all those knots or to get through all those bad beliefs that you used to believe in, but now it seems like you keep going through a process to where you straighten out your beliefs on one subject, and then a short time later, another subject comes up. And then even if you straighten out that problem, something else comes up a short time later or a year or two later, and then you're right back in the process all over again. It can be maddening and frustrating sometimes, but it is worth it. The more I learn and the more I get some of these bad beliefs straightened out, and I find evidence that makes my old beliefs look not quite so right on the money as I thought they were, but once I start to learn more of the proof and see where the evidence points in the right direction, it really does help you to understand God's love, and that it seems like every time you learn a little bit more about God's love, it's better than you thought it was. And then a short time later, you learn even more about God's love, and you're finding out it's even better than you thought that other time. It just seems to keep getting better and better all the time. So don't let these little setbacks get on your nerves or get you frustrated or make you feel like giving up. Believe me, the process is worth investigating to find the evidence, and it can work out. I know it can work out. From some of the problems that I had in the past, I'm amazed that I've even learned half of what I know now. I never thought I'd learn some of the stuff that I've learned over the last few years. So it can get better. And don't be afraid to ask for God to help you in miraculous ways. I've seen that happen too. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen some of that stuff with my own eyes, but it can happen. So if you ever feel like you're stuck and you just can't get out of the rut you're in or figure out some issue that you're facing, ask God to help you, and even ask God to help you with his miraculous power. It can happen, because I've seen it. And a lot of times in my life, I've even had miraculous dreams that I think were sent by God, because those things turned the path of my life in a totally different direction. And as I look back on some of those situations, I sure am glad that God pointed me in another direction. Because one of those miraculous dreams is where I met a person who told me that I shouldn't go back to an abusive church situation that I was in. And it turned out a short time later, after I left that church, the next church that I became a regular attender at was the one where I met people that told me about God's love. So those sorts of things can happen. Now, if you're from a church that doesn't believe in some of the miraculous things, well, I understand. I used to go to churches like that too, so I don't hold anything against you. Just try to look for the evidence and see what happens. If somebody tells you something that really points you towards God's love and it really makes you feel good inside, it's probably true. But if somebody tells you something that points you away from God's love, or makes you feel fearful in your own heart and mind, or if it makes you feel shame, like you pretty nearly just want to go away and hide somewhere, that's probably not from God. Because if you really take a look at what God's love is like by reading 1 Corinthians 13, you're probably going to find out that God's love is a lot better than you thought. And you might even go read that same chapter again a month later, and you might see that it's even greater than you thought the month before. And you might even find that a lot of those beliefs that you had just a few months ago might change again. Some people, I've even heard some people say that they don't even believe the things they believed last year, and they may not even believe the same things in the next day or two. So don't be afraid to look for the evidence, and don't be afraid if that evidence makes you study it for several days or several weeks or months. It is worth it, and it can turn out for the better. I know, because I've seen it happen in my life, and I've seen things that I've discovered that, like I said, I never thought I would learn about some of the things that I've learned about. And to have it change you so much deep inside your own heart and mind, and in the way that you act, that people come up to you and say, wow, it's like the way you behave now, it's like you're not even the same person you used to be. That's what people told me when I first surrendered to God's love. I never thought I could make that big of a change in my life. As a matter of fact, I'd tried a few times to change, and it just didn't change very much. But once I found out about God's love and I really surrendered to it, there was a massive change in my life. And it can happen. And if you'd like to know a few other books that I would recommend to help learn about God's love, there's a few of them that have helped me and that I've enjoyed reading through the years, like He Loves Me by Wayne Jacobson, or Pluriform Love by Thomas J. Ord. Those have been very helpful to me as well. There's also a lot of different things that I learned over the next few years after I finally got to that point of gaining a better understanding of God's love. There was many other things that I learned, and there was a lot more painful situations and a lot more frustrating situations, but I really learned a lot over those next few years. I'd also like to let you know that if you'd like to support this show, you can support me by going on the internet to my PayPal account, which is paypal.me/Lenny Manning. I'll put it there on the bottom of the screen so you can see that. And I might even be talking about this in the future. So be looking for those episodes as well. I've got a lot of different plans for a lot of different things on a lot of different episodes. But as for right now, I'll just say, see you later, and I hope you have a great day.